How does a promising young man, a physics graduate and Boy Scout, transform into the architect of a billion-dollar criminal empire? How does a dream of absolute freedom lead to the creation of Silk Road, the most notorious black market on the dark web? This is the story of Ross Ulbricht, a man who built an underground empire from behind a laptop, evading authorities for years until everything fell apart. Today, we dive into his journey from his childhood dreams to the moment the FBI finally caught him. You'll discover how he was arrested, what really happened inside that courtroom and prison, and what life is like for him now. It's a story of power, ambition, and the fatal mistakes that changed his life forever. Let's get into it. My name is Ross Ulbricht, and I was born on March 27, 1984, in Austin, Texas. I grew up in a loving family and was a Boy Scout, earning the highest rank of Eagle Scout just like my dad. I was a pretty easygoing guy, but I took my studies seriously. I scored 1460 on my SATs, which helped me get a full scholarship to the University of Texas at Dallas, where I studied physics. Later, I received another full scholarship for a master's at Penn State in materials science and engineering. While I was at Penn, I started to explore libertarian philosophy. I became convinced that government interference should be minimized, allowing people the freedom to make their own choices without unnecessary restrictions. During this time, I created a YouTube channel where I shared my thoughts and ideas, hoping to inspire others who believed in personal freedom and individual responsibility. Remember this because it will play a role later in my story. Although I was a smart student, my business career didn't start off so well. I wanted to change the world, but my life so far had been a series of almosts. I had tried several business ideas, but none of them ever really took off. The more I failed, the more I felt like life was passing me by, until one idea sparked in my mind like a fire that refused to go out. A business that aligned perfectly with my beliefs. An online marketplace where people could buy and sell anything without limits or restrictions. I often debated with others about why the government shouldn't have so much control over people's lives, especially when it came to drugs. I believed it wasn't the government's right to decide what individuals could or couldn't put into their bodies. To me, this marketplace wasn't just about making money, it was a way to free people. It was about challenging the system, creating a space where individuals had complete autonomy over their choices. This wasn't just a business idea. But wait, how could I actually make this marketplace work? If I launched it on the regular internet, I'd be caught on the first day. I started searching online, looking for a way to make it possible. That's when I found something, a web browser called Tor. Tor allowed access to a hidden layer of the internet known as the dark web, a place where anything illegal could take place without being tracked. It was originally developed by the US Navy as a tool for secure communication, designed to conceal users' real IP addresses and identities. With Tor, I realized that people could buy and sell online without the government watching their every move. But there was still a problem. Even if I could hide the marketplace itself, payments were an issue. Credit cards left a digital trail, linking every transaction to a real identity and a bank account. Without a way to process payments anonymously, the site was just an idea in my mind, an idea I wasn't sure would ever become real. This was my thought until I discovered something in 2010, and I remember that day well. The day I discovered Bitcoin, a new digital currency that allowed people to transfer money anonymously, without a trace. It was exactly what I needed. From that day on, my business was no longer just an idea. It was becoming real. I started building my online marketplace and decided to name it Silk Road, inspired by the ancient trade route that had connected merchants for over 2,000 years. I wasn't a professional coder, but that didn't stop me. I taught myself how to build the site, and when I needed more help, I reached out on a Bitcoin community forum. I wrote, I'm looking for the best and brightest IT pro in the Bitcoin community to be the lead developer in a venture-backed Bitcoin startup company. Anyone interested was told to contact me at this email address, rossulbricht@gmail.com. I also got coding help from a friend from my undergrad days, Richard Bates. At first, I kept the full scope of my project a secret, but eventually, I had no choice. I had to tell him what I was really building. I also told my girlfriend Julia. She was worried at first, but I assured her that with the Tor browser and Bitcoin, everything would remain completely anonymous. Still, I could tell she had her doubts. Anyway, I was determined to make this a reality. I spent countless hours at my laptop, coding all day and deep into the night, only stopping occasionally to take a break, until that day, the day I neared the completion of Silk Road. But then I realized something. What was the point of a marketplace if there was nothing to sell? I needed a product to get things started, so I rented out a building in the middle of nowhere and began growing my own magic mushrooms. Using a book that was basically a beginner's guide to mushroom farming, I set up my own small operation. These psychedelic mushrooms would be the first product ever sold on Silk Road. When I showed Julia what I was growing, she was uneasy. I told her this was just the beginning. Eventually, Silk Road would be a marketplace for all kinds of drugs. After a year of relentless work, the site was finally ready to go live. I had built categories for all different types of drugs, but at first, the only item listed was the magic mushrooms I had grown myself. The plan, however, was much bigger than just my own product. I envisioned sellers from all over the world joining in, listing their own items for sale. Of course, to make that happen, I needed to attract both buyers and sellers to the site. But how was I going to do that when there was no search engine optimization or ads on the dark web? Well, I had to get creative. Since I couldn't advertise Silk Road in the usual ways, I turned to online forums. I created an account under the username Altoid and started posting on sites where potential users might be. On the Shroomery, a forum for mushroom enthusiasts, I pretended to be just another curious user who had stumbled across Silk Road. I wrote something like, "I came across this website called Silk Road. It's a Tor hidden service that claims to allow you to buy and sell anything online anonymously. I'm thinking of buying off it, but wanted to see if anyone here had heard of it and could recommend it." I did the same thing on a Bitcoin forum, posting in a thread about buying and selling heroin. I described Silk Road as an anonymous Amazon.com, hoping to spark curiosity. The strategy worked. People started checking out the site, and before long, the first orders started coming in. I was overjoyed. Finally, a business of mine was actually succeeding. But just as I was celebrating, a thought hit me. What if scammers started taking advantage of my site? I needed a way to keep things fair and trustworthy, so I implemented a rating system for sellers similar to Amazon reviews. If a seller provided low-quality drugs or scammed buyers, they'd receive bad ratings, which would hurt their sales. This way, only the most reliable vendors would thrive, and buyers could feel more confident in their purchases. But you may be wondering, how did we ship our products without getting caught? To avoid detection, we had to get creative with our shipping methods. At the time, I was working at a small bookstore in Texas called Goodwagon Books, which turned out to be the perfect cover. I had access to padded envelopes, a label maker, and everything I needed to discreetly send out my mushrooms. I even used a vacuum sealer, normally meant for keeping food fresh, to wrap the packages tightly. As more sellers joined, they started coming up with their own methods. Some hid drugs inside CD and DVD cases, while others tucked them into the ripples of cardboard to avoid detection. Mailing labels were always printed instead of handwritten, making them look like they came from legitimate businesses. We were smart, and for a while it worked. But as more people discovered Silk Road, the demand grew rapidly. At first, shipping a few times a week was enough, but that didn't last long. Orders were coming in faster than ever, and soon I found myself packing and mailing shipments every single day just to keep up. A few months in, I had already made thousands of dollars in revenue. I told Julia about the site's success, expecting her to share in my excitement, but she wasn't nearly as thrilled. Her concern had been growing ever since harder drugs started appearing on Silk Road. She couldn't stay quiet any longer. "What if someone overdoses?" she asked. "Or what if a seller sends out something laced with something deadly?" I confidently reminded her of the rating system. If someone sells bad drugs, they'll get a bad rating. No one will buy from them again. She stared at me for a moment before replying, "Yeah, but how are they supposed to leave a bad rating if they're dead?" I opened my mouth to respond, but had no answer. She had a point, and deep down, I knew it. But that didn't stop me. I had come too far to turn back now. After this incident, things only got bigger. In June 2011, a journalist named Adrian Chen from Gorka wrote an article about Silk Road. He described it as a place where you could buy drugs online as easily as ordering books or light bulbs. The article went viral, racking up millions of views and putting Silk Road in the spotlight like never before. Almost overnight, traffic to the site exploded. More buyers, more sellers. It was everything I had hoped for. But not all the attention was good. Major news outlets like ABC and NBC started reporting on Silk Road, calling it an underground marketplace for illegal drugs. And with media attention came government attention. Politicians like Senator Chuck Schumer demanded that Silk Road be shut down, and multiple law enforcement agencies began watching the site closely, trying to figure out who was running it. At this point, I had mixed feelings. Thrilled that Silk Road had grown beyond my wildest expectations, yet uneasy because I couldn't shake the feeling that my time was running out. But I kept pushing forward. One morning, I opened my laptop and saw something new listed on the site. Guns. For a moment, I hesitated. This wasn't what I had originally envisioned for Silk Road. But then, I reminded myself of something I strongly believed in: the right to self-defense. In my mind, if people had the freedom to buy drugs, then why not firearms? After all, in America, owning a gun was a constitutional right. So I let it happen. At first, I tried to justify it to myself, but not everyone saw it that way, especially Julia. "Ross, you have to stop this," she pleaded. "Think about why someone would need to buy a gun anonymously." We argued, but I refused to back down. To me, Silk Road was about freedom, and that included the right to self-defense. But Julia saw something darker. The pressure of keeping my secret was eating away at her, and she became increasingly paranoid. One night, she went to her friend Erica's house to vent. She finally broke down and told Erica everything. She made Erica swear she'd never tell a soul, and for a while, it seemed like she kept that promise. Looking back, I regretted ever telling Julia about Silk Road. I thought I could trust her, but the truth was too heavy for her to carry. She wasn't just worried about me, she was terrified of what the site could become. And as much as I tried to ignore it, a part of me knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Around the same time, my old college friend Richard, who had helped me with programming, urged me to shut it all down. He saw where this was headed, but I wasn't ready to walk away. So I lied. I told both Julia and Richard that I had sold the site to someone else and that I had nothing to do with it anymore. I thought that would ease their worries. Maybe it even did, for a little while. One morning, I logged into Facebook and felt my stomach drop. Right there on my wall for everyone to see was a post from Julia's best friend, Erica. I'm sure the authorities would love to know about Ross Ulbricht's drug website. Panic hit me like a freight train. My hands shook as I deleted the post as fast as I could. How many people had seen it? Had it already spread? I grabbed my phone and called Erica, my voice breaking as I begged her to never say anything like that again. I was furious. Julia had told her. I trusted her with my secret, and now it was out in the open. But more than anger, I felt fear. Real, suffocating fear. If that post had been seen by the wrong person, my entire operation could have come crashing down. And in that moment, I knew. Julia had never believed me when I told her I sold the site. I thought I had eased her worries, but deep down, she knew I was lying. The late nights, the constant stress, the way I avoided the topic. It was obvious I was still running Silk Road. And now, the weight of that lie had come full circle. Erica had posted it out of spite. She had a bad trip from something she bought off Silk Road, ended up in the hospital, and when she got back, she made the post in a reckless act of revenge. Luckily, I caught it in time. It was only visible to our Facebook friends, most of whom probably assumed it was a joke. Crisis averted, for now. But that incident changed everything. It made me realize how exposed I really was. Julia and I were already on shaky ground, but after that, it was over. She gave me an ultimatum: shut down Silk Road or walk away from her life forever. I left. In fact, I left the country. I needed to lay low, clear my head, and figure out my next move. So I packed my bags and started traveling, hoping that distance would keep me safe. I moved to Australia for a while and lived with my sister in Sydney. Around this time, I was contacted by someone who called himself Variety Jones. He quickly became more than just another user. He became my right-hand man, a guide, someone I could rely on. I even started thinking of him as a mentor. Like me, he stayed anonymous. I didn't know his real name, and he didn't know mine. But despite never meeting in person, he understood Silk Road better than anyone else. Variety Jones was sharp. He spotted weaknesses in the site's security that I hadn't even considered. He made me realize just how exposed I really was. If I wanted to keep Silk Road running and keep myself out of prison, I had to take security to the next level. I encrypted every file on my computer, making sure that even if someone got their hands on it, they wouldn't be able to access anything. But that wasn't enough. I needed a failsafe in case the authorities ever came crashing through my door. So I installed a kill switch, a simple command that would instantly shut down my laptop with the press of a single key, erasing everything in seconds. And just in case things really went south, I had an escape plan. If I needed to disappear, I'd ditch my laptop and hard drive, destroy anything that could tie me to Silk Road, and vanish. I'd find a new place to live, pay for everything in cash, and start over with a new identity. I wasn't just running a website anymore, I was living like a fugitive, and I knew that one wrong move could bring everything crashing down. I also had to be extra careful about where and how I accessed the site. I couldn't just log in from anywhere. Every move had to be calculated. Most of the time, I relied on internet cafes to get online, but that came with its own risks. I was constantly paranoid that someone might glance over and see something they weren't supposed to. To avoid drawing attention, I always picked a seat in the corner where no one could peek at my screen. And just to be safe, I programmed my laptop with an extra layer of protection. One keystroke and my screen would instantly go black. If I ever felt someone watching, all it took was a quick press, and any trace of Silk Road would vanish in an instant. What was ironic, though, was that despite being wealthier than I had ever imagined, I wasn't happy. I thought money would bring me fulfillment, but it didn't. Instead, I felt restless, anxious, like I was constantly on edge, waiting for something to go wrong. That's when I started to believe that wealth alone doesn't guarantee happiness. What do you think? Have you ever felt like success or money didn't bring the happiness you expected? Share your thoughts in the comments. Anyway, by this time, Silk Road was growing fast. My main focus was fixing bugs and making the site as safe as possible. Variety Jones was a big help. He didn't just point out security problems, he also gave me advice on how to run the site better. With his help, I made Silk Road stronger and bigger than I ever planned. I started hiring trusted users to help run the site. I had moderators, coders, and support staff, turning Silk Road into a fully functioning business. Sales exploded, and my wealth soared into the tens of millions, mostly in Bitcoin, stored on thumb drives hidden around my apartment. But success came with complications. The product offerings expanded beyond what I ever intended. Spyware, fake passports, counterfeit cash, even poisons. One day, a moderator messaged me asking if we should allow someone to sell human body parts. I hadn't envisioned any of this when I started Silk Road, but I stuck to my belief that it was just a platform like eBay or Facebook. Who was I to decide what people could or couldn't buy? Silk Road had become more than just a marketplace. It was a movement. The community bonded over their shared distrust of authority. We even had movie nights where we'd all watch the same film together. My first pick? V for Vendetta, a perfect match for the site's anti-government sentiment. We ran competitions to attract new users, giving away prizes, including free drugs. It was all part of building the brand. But with growth came threats. Hackers targeted Silk Road constantly, either stealing Bitcoin through site vulnerabilities or launching cyber attacks and demanding ransom. But by then, I was making so much money that paying them off barely mattered. It was just another cost of doing business. The real problem was staying anonymous. Variety Jones suggested I stop using admin as my username and adopt a new identity, Dread Pirate Roberts. If I were ever caught, I could claim the title had been passed down, just like in The Princess Bride. It was the perfect cover story. Despite all my precautions, cracks were starting to show. I couldn't ignore the real-world consequences of what I'd built. News reports surfaced about kids overdosing on synthetic drugs purchased from Silk Road. One boy, convinced he could fly, jumped off a balcony after taking a dangerously potent batch of LSD. Another group of teenagers had ordered a party pack of unregulated substances from China, and one of them ran straight off a hotel roof in a drug-induced panic. Even after hearing those heartbreaking stories, I kept pushing forward. I was greedy. No matter how much success I had, it never felt like enough. I worked harder than ever to expand Silk Road. I was constantly improving the site, fixing vulnerabilities, making it stronger. But while I was busy building my empire, the authorities were working just as hard to tear it down. Before I tell you how it all began, the investigation, the manhunt, and how they caught me, make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the story. Now let's get to the most intense part, the beginning of the end. As a wanted man, I was constantly on the move, never staying in one place for too long. But my last stop would be San Francisco, where I moved in with a childhood friend after flying in from Australia. I managed my business from a local cafe, thinking I was still in control. But while I was fine-tuning Silk Road, someone else was quietly unraveling everything I had built, piece by piece. That man was Gary Alford, a tax investigator with the IRS. Unlike the other agents focused on tracing Silk Road's money flow, Alford had a different approach. He wasn't an expert in Bitcoin or the dark web, but he was meticulous, reading everything multiple times, searching for the smallest mistake that could crack the case wide open. He started by running a simple Google search, filtering results to find the earliest mentions of Silk Road, long before the site became infamous. That's when he found something interesting. Posts from a user named Altoid on a forum called The Shroomery, talking about Silk Road as if he had just stumbled upon it. Alfred dug deeper, finding another post from the same username on Bitcoin Talk, where Altoid promoted Silk Road, calling it an anonymous Amazon. The real breakthrough came months later when that same username posted a job listing for a Bitcoin-related startup. The post ended with an email contact, rossulbricht@gmail.com. Alfred had a name, but could Ross Ulbricht really be the mastermind behind Silk Road? His colleagues dismissed the lead. Just because someone posted about Silk Road first didn't mean they created it. But Alfred wasn't ready to let it go. He knew he was onto something, And he wasn't the only one. The US government was pouring resources into tracking down Dread Pirate Roberts. Multiple agencies, the FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security, were all working on the case, each following their own leads. The race was on to unmask the man behind Silk Road, and little did I know, they were closing in fast. In May 2013, investigators discovered a crucial mistake: coding errors on Silk Road that exposed IP addresses. These vulnerabilities led them straight to the site's servers, which were housed in a data center in Iceland. With this information, the FBI worked alongside Icelandic authorities to infiltrate Silk Road's back end, gaining access to everything happening behind the scenes. While the FBI was digging into the server, Gary Ulford was still piecing together the identity of Dread Pirate Roberts. My identity. The more he investigated, the more convinced he became that I was the man behind Silk Road. Remember that small detail I told you to keep in mind? My YouTube channel, my words, my interests? Back then, it was just part of my ideology. Now, it was evidence against me. Every little thing from my past, everything I had openly shared, was now working against me. Gary had found my YouTube channel videos about libertarian ideals, along with a saved video titled "How to Get Away with Stealing." But what really caught his attention was something small but strange. I often use the phrase, "oh yeah," in my online posts. That same phrase appeared over and over again in messages from Dread Pirate Roberts. A small habit, something I never thought twice about. Now, it was evidence. Then came my LinkedIn profile, where I had written, "The most widespread and systematic use of force is among institutions and governments, so this is my current point of effort." I'd also mentioned creating an economic simulation to show people what a world without government control would look like. And then, the biggest mistake of all. A coding question about Tor that I had once posted on Stack Overflow. At first, I used my real name, but within a minute, I realized the slip-up and changed the username to Frosty. But it was too late. The evidence was piling up. Alfred needed confirmation, so he reached out to a colleague at Homeland Security, asking him to check if my name had ever been flagged in any investigations. What they found was another major red flag. I had ordered fake IDs online, and when questioned by authorities, I casually mentioned that anyone could just go on a website called Silk Road to buy them. Why did I say that? Maybe I was trying to downplay the whole thing. Maybe I was just overconfident, thinking Silk Road was untouchable. But piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. The FBI had the server. Alfred had my name. And now, the government agencies that had spent over 2 years hunting Dread Pirate Roberts were finally starting to connect the dots. Once the FBI gained access to the Silk Road server in Iceland, they had everything they needed: logs, transactions, user data. But most importantly, they could see live activity on the server. They could track when the Silk Road admin logged in and out. And then came the biggest breakthrough yet. The most recent admin login had come from an internet cafe in San Francisco. It was a lead, but they still didn't know exactly who Dread Pirate Roberts was. That's when they got a call from Gary Ulford. On a group call with agents from the FBI, DEA, and IRS, Gary laid out everything he had found. He explained how Altoid was the first person to ever mention Silk Road online, posting about it on multiple forums, almost like he was trying to promote the site. He detailed how that same username later slipped up, revealing an email, rossulbricht@gmail.com. Then he pointed to a coding question on Stack Overflow, one that was first posted under my real name, but changed to the username Frosty just a minute later. That's when one of the FBI agents suddenly interrupted him. "Wait, did you just say Frosty?" Gary was momentarily frustrated. He still had more to explain. "Yes, I said Frosty, but why are you focusing on that?" The agent's response changed everything. Because when we got access to the Silk Road server, we found that both the server and DPR's personal computer were named the same thing. Frosty. For a moment, there was silence. Then it all clicked. Gary then added another piece to the puzzle. He had tracked my current address thanks to the fake ID incident on my record. When he shared it with the FBI, the agents couldn't believe it. I was living in San Francisco, just a few blocks away from the internet cafe where they had traced the Silk Road admin login. At that moment, every agency on that call knew the truth. I was Dread Pirate Roberts. Now they just had to catch me. But that wasn't going to be as easy as you might think. The FBI assigned a team of undercover agents to track my every move. Since they had access to the Silk Road server logs, they could see exactly when the admin, me, logged in or out. I was their guy. So why not arrest me right then and there? Well, that wouldn't be enough. They needed solid evidence, undeniable proof that I was running Silk Road. And the key to that proof was my laptop. If they caught me with my laptop closed, it would be game over for them. The data was encrypted, nearly impossible to crack, and I could always claim deniability. But if they caught me with my laptop open, logged into Silk Road as Dread Pirate Roberts, they'd have everything they needed. Not just to prosecute me, but to track down others, the admins, dealers, and everyone involved in Silk Road. They had to make their move at the right time, in the right place. Authorities also had a court order to access my Gmail account. What they found only confirmed their suspicions. Every time Dread Pirate Roberts logged into Silk Road, my Google account was also active. And every time I logged out, Dread Pirate Roberts disappeared too. But even that wasn't enough to nail me. They had one shot at this. They had to catch me in public, completely off guard, with my laptop open. So they waited. They followed me everywhere, watching, tracking, planning, and then they saw their chance. October 1st, 2013. I walked into the San Francisco Public Library, settling into a quiet spot in the science fiction section. I opened my laptop, logged into Silk Road, and got to work, unaware that the room around me was filled with undercover agents. One of them, Homeland Security Agent Jared Deyegyan, had spent months infiltrating Silk Road. His biggest breakthrough came when he tracked down a Silk Road forum moderator known as Cirrus. Under pressure, she handed over her account. From that moment on, Deyegyan controlled it, posing as her. Through this, he gained direct access to Dread Pirate Roberts, receiving assignments and communicating as if nothing had changed. Now, he was messaging me as usual, casually drawing me into a conversation. At some point, he asked me to check a flagged message in the admin panel, something only Dread Pirate Roberts could do. I was cautious, but after a brief exchange, I was convinced. I logged in. The agents had their green light. Suddenly, a loud argument broke out behind me. "F you!" a woman shouted. Her voice was sharp, filled with anger. I turned just in time to see a man raising his hand like he was about to hit her. I didn't think. I just reacted. I turned around, and that was all they needed. An agent lunged from the side, snatching my open laptop right off the table. My brain barely had time to register what was happening before my body moved on instinct. I lunged after it, too late. Another agent had already grabbed me from behind in a tight bear hug, locking my arms in place. I fought to move, to reach for the laptop, but it was useless. I was caught. They dragged me away as agents swarmed my laptop, eyes scanning the screen. And there it was, the Silk Road admin panel wide open. And in the corner of the screen, the one detail that sealed everything. My username, Frosty. My whole body tensed as I watched them gather around my laptop. Everything was right there, my work, my secrets, out in the open. It felt like the world had stopped moving, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but there was none. They had me. They started looking through my laptop, and it didn't take long for them to find everything. A diary, filled with notes about running Silk Road, my plans, my choices. Thousands of chat messages showing every step I had taken. There was no way to explain it away. They also saw just how massive Silk Road really was. A website that made around $1.2 billion from selling drugs, weapons, poisons, and other illegal goods. It must have shocked them to see the full scale of it. But then, they found something even more surprising. Carl and Sean, two federal agents who had secretly stolen money and used Silk Road for their own gain. Their story wasn't just shocking to the agents, it shocked me too. Carl Force, a DEA agent, had been undercover on Silk Road under the username Knob. He posed as a drug smuggler and slowly gained my trust. Then, he claimed to have insider information from a government mole and offered to sell it to me. But in reality, he was the mole. Over time, I paid him more than $750,000 in Bitcoin, money he pocketed for himself. Meanwhile, Sean Bridges, a Secret Service agent, found his own way to steal. When Silk Road moderator Curtis Green was arrested, Sean used his admin access to take 20,000 Bitcoin, worth $350,000 at the time. When I saw the missing funds, I thought Curtis had betrayed me. I wanted to send a message. At first, I only wanted Curtis beaten up, but after some convincing from people I trusted, I agreed to something much worse. I asked if someone could kill him. Carl saw another opportunity. He pretended to arrange the hit for $80,000 in Bitcoin. I sent the payment, but the hit never happened. Carl and his team staged Curtis's death, took photos, and sent them to me. I believed it. I even wrote in my diary that I was disturbed by what I had done, but I convinced myself it had to be done. Later, I ordered more hits. On a hacker blackmailing me and 4 others I thought had crossed me. But just like Curtis, none of them were actually killed. The so-called hitmen were just scammers taking my money. After my arrest, the messages were discovered and prosecutors dropped the murder-for-hire charges because in the end, nobody had actually died. Carl and Sean faced their own punishment. Carl Force, the corrupt DEA agent who posed as Knob, was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison for extortion, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Sean Bridges, the Secret Service agent who stole Bitcoin from Silk Road accounts, received nearly 6 years behind bars for money laundering and obstruction. And even that wasn't the end for him. He was later sentenced to 2 more years for stealing even more Bitcoin, this time from the US government itself. For me, the charges were even worse. I was indicted on 7 counts: distributing narcotics via the internet, engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, conspiracy to commit computer hacking, conspiracy to traffic fraudulent identity documents, conspiracy to launder money, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, and conspiracy to engage in narcotics trafficking. My trial began on January 13, 2015, and lasted 3 weeks. During my trial, my lawyers admitted I had created Silk Road, but argued it was a libertarian experiment, not a criminal enterprise. They claimed I had handed it over to someone else, the real Dread Pirate Roberts, and had stepped away entirely. They also suggested some evidence like chat logs and diary files could have been planted, but the prosecution's case was overwhelming. I was caught in a public library, logged into Silk Road's admin panel. My laptop contained years of chat logs detailing the site's creation, discussions about using the DPR persona as a cover, and messages about expanding Silk Road's fake ID business, sent at the same time fake IDs with my face had been intercepted. As for the claim that I sold the site, there was no proof. Bitcoin commissions were still flowing to wallets tied to me. The prosecution argued I had been in control from the start, so for me, it was game over. Before my sentencing, I wrote a letter to the judge, pleading for a chance at freedom someday. I admitted my mistakes and begged for a light at the end of the tunnel, a reason to stay hopeful. I've had my youth, and I know you must take away my middle years, but please leave me my old age, a chance to redeem myself in the free world before I meet my maker. But Judge Catherine B. Forrest saw things differently. On May 29, 2015, she handed down her decision: 2 life sentences plus 40 years, without the possibility of parole. In her eyes, I wasn't just someone who had made a mistake, I was the leader of a dangerous empire. "You were the captain of the ship, as the dread pirate Roberts," she said. "You made your own laws and enforced them as you saw fit." This wasn't a world of ultimate freedom, it was a world where you were in control. To her, Silk Road wasn't just a marketplace, it was a system that fueled addiction, crime, and death. And because of that, there would be no second chances for me. Some believed my sentence was excessive, a warning meant to deter others from following in my footsteps. But warnings don't matter much when you're the one behind bars. Prison stripped away everything I once knew. Every morning, I wake up in a cage, reminded that this could be my reality for the rest of my life. The weight of that thought is crushing. I've lost years that I will never get back, years of freedom, of family, of simply existing in the world beyond these walls. The isolation is one of the hardest parts. The world moves on without me, while I remain trapped in the same routine, cut off from the life I once had. The freedoms I took for granted, choosing what to eat, stepping outside whenever I wanted, even just feeling the sun on my face, are now distant memories. But even here, I've tried to find purpose. I write, I reflect, I create. Prison forces you to confront yourself in ways you never expect. I've had to face my past, my choices, and the reality of my situation head on. Despite everything, I hold on to hope. My family, my friends, and the people who continue to support me. They remind me that I'm not entirely forgotten. And as long as I had that, I kept going, clinging to the fragile hope that somehow, someday, my fate might shift. And then, when I least expected it, the day came. The day that would change everything.
And if you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to a sentence of time served.
The moment I heard those words, it felt unreal. After years of believing I would die in prison, suddenly there was hope, real hope. My heart pounded, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that freedom wasn't just a distant dream. I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. Was this really happening? Could my nightmare finally be coming to an end? And then, the impossible happened. On his first full day in office, President Trump granted me a full and unconditional pardon. Just like that, after more than 11 years behind bars, I was free. That evening, he posted on Truth Social, announcing the news. I just called the mother of Ross William Ulbricht to let her know that in honor of her and the libertarian movement, which supported me so strongly, it was my pleasure to have just signed a full and unconditional pardon of her son, Ross. The scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics who were involved in the modern-day weaponization of government against me. He was given 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Ridiculous. From that day on, I stepped into a world that had moved on without me. Regaining my freedom felt unreal. But I wasn't the same person. Prison changed me. I lost years I can never get back, but I also gained a new way of seeing life. I carry the weight of my past, but I won't let it define me. I've made mistakes, but I've learned, grown, and found a deeper appreciation for life. I'm grateful to my family, those who never stopped fighting for me, and President Trump for my second chance. Now that you've heard my entire story, you might think this is one of the darkest cases on the dark web, but you'd be wrong. The story of Peter Scully is far more horrifying. Make sure to check it out. And if you found this story interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.